So, Formula One returned to the streets of Baku at the weekend just gone after taking a year off. And as we alluded to in last week's episode, it is usually quite a spicy race with a bit of action. And this weekend did not disappoint. The race kicked off on Sunday with Charles Leclerc taking his second successive, is that right?
Yeah.
His second successive pole position. How excited were you to see him at the front again?
Buzzing. It's great, isn't it? Like, it now I'm kind of glad that he didn't keep that pole in Monaco, because he might have just got swallowed up as he did eventually in Azerbaijan. But there's definitely some pace there. And it goes to prove, I think, some drivers in Q3 might save themselves for that final run. Don't, because you don't know when Yuki Tsunoda might find himself in the wall. You need to really bank a quick lap, rather than a safe lap, in that first run. And that's what Charles has done pretty consistently.
Well, that was kind of the message throughout qualifying, wasn't it? Because we had, was it 4 red flags in the end across all 3 qualifying sessions, which is not something I've ever seen before.
No, it's record equaling, I think, with Hungary a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? I was almost kind of halfway through the race wondering, where are all the drivers from yesterday? Because there's, nowhere near it. They're actually keeping it on the track.
No, exactly. But because of the madness, it meant that we had like Lance Stroll starting at the back. He was joined by Antonio Giovinazzi on the last row. So we had a few drivers out of position. And then when the race kicked off, have you seen the Formula One's roundup of the top onboards?
I skimmed through it earlier, yeah.
Yeah, there's some nice shots of people like Lance and Antonio dicing through the pack on the opening lap. So they had a great start. Unfortunately, despite starting on pole, Charles Leclerc, his opening few laps weren't quite as successful, were they?
No, but better than Carlos Sainz, his teammate, who had a bit of a moment at the same place he had a moment in qualifying, I think, didn't he? In qualifying it was like turn 3 or 4, and in the race it was down near turn 12, wasn't it, just before the Old Town section. Didn't seem to be as on it as he has been in previous weekends, especially, let's say, Monaco, where he got on the podium, is he?
Yeah, he definitely seemed to be a little bit spooked, maybe, just kind of breaking a bit off, and he had quite a few lockups throughout the whole race, really, which was a little bit of a change in fortunes for the cars we've seen recently.
Yeah, Charles had a big lockup after the restart as well, and if only they had some kind of system that heated the tyres at the front through the brakes, that would be...
That could really save their fortunes. So yeah, the first few laps of the race, Lewis did manage to make it past Charles, and then he was closely followed by the 2 Red Bulls of Max and Sergio Perez, after they both made it past Charles as well. And everything sort of looked as if it was sort of slotting into place for the kind of result and format that we're used to, but then things started to spice up a bit when Lewis went into the pits on lap 11 or lap 12, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in the box, and then Pierre Gasly came in just after, so he got held for an extra sort of 1 or 2 seconds, which then brought him out behind. After everyone had done their pit stops, it meant that Lewis was behind Max and Perez. So we were looking, if everything stayed as it was, we were looking at the first Red Bull 1-2 in years.
There was even a chance, we've spoken about the need for Perez to kind of step up as the second driver, and he was... we've talked about Perez's tyre management this season already, where he's done, godly stints on certain tyres. And he did the same, and could have even jumped Max in the pits, had it not been for an uncharacteristic slow stop from the Red Bull team. Which makes you wonder if that was, fate or otherwise. But yeah, he did.
Reputation for peddling conspiracy theories on this show at this rate.
No.
Yeah, I was very impressed by Sergio this weekend. He did exactly what was needed. He qualified in like sixth, I think it was, and within the first few laps, he passed everyone to get into that rear gunner position to hold the fort for anything that might come up against Max. And he meant that they got that defence and they could have played different strategies if and when they needed to. But after we'd seen the slight misfortune in Lewis's pit stop and what that meant, it kind of the race sort of slowed a bit. And I ended up watching it a bit later than it was on, and I'd had a few people messaging me saying, "It's amazing!" So then for sort of that 15 or so laps when not what was happening, I was just like, what's everyone on about? Why has it got this reputation of the best race?
You've been absolutely catfished. Well, let's let Owen waste 2 hours of his life.
So, I could have gone out for breakfast at this rate.
But aren't you glad you didn't?
Exactly, because on lap 31, all hell broke loose and it was anyone's game.
Well, when Lance Stroll's out of the game, who knows what could happen?
Exactly. Good life motto.
So, yeah, Lance Stroll had a tyre failure. Bashed into the wall. I think his catchphrase is fast becoming, I got a puncture. He seems to always come across with that little radio. He had the same in Mugello. He's been unlucky because he's been on the receiving end of these tyre blowouts more than anyone else, it seems. What do you think, then? Do you think this was Pirelli's tyres at fault, the compounds, or do you think it was what their theory is, debris on the track?
Yeah, I'm really not sure, because it seems if it was just that one, then you could have been like, oh yeah, sure, there could have been a bit of debris, because the commentary team was saying quite a lot over the weekend that because it was so windy, as well as like race debris, stuff was blowing onto the circuit, so there'd been like a few branches and like bits of rubbish and things like that. So you could sort of see that hitting a branch might damage the integrity of the tyre. So if it had been the case that it was just him that it happened to, then I kind of maybe would have come down on Pirelli's side and been like, oh yeah, maybe. But the fact that it was on the fastest bit of the circuit, the fastest 36% of the circuit, and that there hadn't really been any incidents in that area up to that point for there to be a sharp bit of carbon fibre or something waiting to poke a hole in his tyre. It does make it seem a little bit more like it's a compound failure rather than anything on his part.
Well, they were talking at the beginning of the race. I think at turn 14, Charles cut the corner to avoid a branch. An overhanging tree had dropped a branch. So there were some extenuating factors that could have played their part. Yeah, there weren't any crashes, so it was unlikely to be anything off a car. But for them to have no inclination, there's so much data that the tyres can get. Hark back to Sakir last year, where George Russell was still able to bomb it round, but the team told him, you've got to puncture, you've got to come in, and he didn't even realise. So to go from 0 to 100 like that, no warning, puts me on the side that I don't know, it's tricky because he wasn't the only person it happened to, but maybe lightning struck twice. I don't know why I'm coming out to defend Pirelli, but it could have been the case. I know people aren't going to trust him that much, but it could have been debris or something and not tyre wear.
It could also have been, it could have been a whole range of different things. It could have been debris, could have been an issue with the design of the tyre, which is more of a serious problem, but then it could even just have been like a little manufacturing defect in that tyre itself that then kind of led to a bit of weakness.
Yeah.
But the official line from Pirelli that I found on ESPN, I think it was, the preliminary investigation showed that it's probably due to an external factor or debris. I don't want to jump to a conclusion now, as the plan is to make a thorough investigation and make a report to the teams and FIA that will hopefully be ready before Paul Ricard. So it's good that they are taking it really seriously and they're going to look into finding out what happened. But just coming back to like the crash itself, that was quite a scary impact. It was very high speed, and Lance just seemed to sort of get caught up in this big cloud of dust and debris. So you can really see what happened for a little while. It was a bit like, whoa,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
Yeah, it was scary. Because even when he did hit the wall, it didn't seem like he lost very much momentum. And I think the scariest thing to him was he was just lying in the middle of the track. He asked for a red flag to be thrown, and to be honest, I'm a little bit annoyed at the. I thought the stewarding this weekend was poor, because you see a crash like that, and immediately you throw a safety car, but it just seemed to take too long to do these things.
Well, the safety car did stay out rather than the race getting red flagged, and it came back in at lap 35, and that restart I was expecting a lot of madness, and it was quite safe and secure, apart from Lance Stroll's teammate Sebastian Vettel, who had a storming restart. He restarted in 6th and managed to get up to 4th within seemingly like 2 or 3 corners. It was fantastic.
It was. Seb wasn't very happy with his 11th place qualifying, and kind of said in the pen afterwards, "Oh yeah, everyone always says you get the free choice of tyres, but no. Like, I don't care. I want to be in the top 10." Boy, is he glad he's not in the top 10, because the fact that he had such fresher tyres than everyone else really played to his advantage on that restart, and also the following restart, which I guess we'll come to later. But yeah, that tyre advantage was so apparent in that opening lap.
Yeah, and I think it was quite interesting that this was definitely the turning point where Seb became the focus of the race.
Well, there was
How high can he finish?
There was a point, because of the tyres he was on, that he was leading the race when everyone else had pitted, and he was going longer on these he was on hards, and everyone else was getting rid of their softs. And part of you is like, he's got a pit, like. And then another part of you is like, what if it's red flagged? Like, what if we restart the race again, he changes his tyres and he's on pole?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And by this point, Max and Sergio were just owning the front. They've got it pinned down. It was theirs to win. Well, it was Red Bull's to win. But then on lap 46, we had the biggest upset of the race. Well, you're rubbing your hands there. Do you want to talk us through what happened?
He crashed.
You're going to have to be more specific.
Well, Max was like 6-8 seconds in front of Sergio in second, and he crashed. His left rear tyre blew up, just like Lance's did, and he was lucky to veer to the right hand side from not the left towards the pit lane. I had a big old shunt and wasn't very happy about it.
No, it was a little bit further down the straight, so I've not seen the speeds, but his looked a lot faster than Lance's crash. No idea if it was, but just the way he hit the wall and spun a bit more, it looked pretty horrific again.
In theory, he should have been, because he would have just been preparing to brake, wouldn't he? But he was lucky to go to the right hand side, because if he had gone to the left, that is where the wall for the pit lane comes in. So if he had just veered the other way, he would have just lost all momentum in kind of one big hit, and that could have been a lot worse than what it was.
Yeah, there was a video Nico Rosberg did just before the race where he was doing a lap on one of the Formula One games, and he said that is one of the scariest points on the circuit he found on the calendar, because
Yeah.
you're just going 300 kilometers an hour or something, and you've just got this pretty much wall head on in front of you. That if you make a mistake, that's going to be a huge accident.
When I'm playing the game, I often try and get a car to overtake me on the left-hand side there, so I can do like a little Mazepin and try and get them into the wall and bring out a safety car.
And that is why you're not a Formula One.
Yes, that's the one reason. The other thing is just before the lap before this happened, F1 threw up the AWS tyre graphic. Why didn't that tell us anything? Surely we should have known this was coming.
Yeah, that graphic, eh? But I do have a question for you.
Oh no.
By this point in the race, we've done 46 out of 51 laps, which is equivalent to 90.2% of the race distance. Do you think it was right to red flag and then restart for 3 laps? Or do you think the race should have been called there and Max should have had the win?
No, there's no reason to stop the race. I think it happens with red flag periods when we talk about rain. So like Malaysia 2009, I think, when Jenson Button won a half points race, that didn't restart because the rain was awful.
Mm.
But there are two constraints to a race: the number of laps or the time elapsed. And if you've not got to either of them, then it's kind of the obligation and the duty to get as close as you can to them. And it wasn't unsafe to start, so yeah, I think we should stop all races 2 laps before the end and start them again. It was great.
But what about the people that say because it was the tyre bursting and it was not really any mistake of Max, that like he shouldn't have, after having held on to the lead for 46 laps or whatever it was, that it wasn't fair for him to have that win taken away from him through no fault of his own.
But that's the thing as well, isn't it? If the red flag comes out, they normally count back a lap to get the result.
Mm.
To which Max Verstappen was winning. So Max Verstappen, it's the same situation you had with Charles taking pole in Monaco. Max would have crashed and won the race. And yeah, it might have not been his fault because it's the tyre, but what if it was his fault? And what if it was a driver error? He goes into the wall, crashes, and you're like, oh, there's only 2 laps left, let's not start it, count back a lap, Max is the winner. How's that fair? He didn't finish the race.
Yeah, I guess at that point you've not had a chance to like analyze all the data and figure out what it is that's caused it. So it could, if they're doing this report, it could come out next week that it was to do with Max. It probably wasn't, but you never know. And then if we've given him the win, you then might have to take it away from him. You've got all this extra admin that no one wants.
Yeah, and like we say, it might not be a fault of Max, but there could have been drivers on the grid, on the track at the time, that were just managing their tyres better, and that's why it didn't happen to them. And it'd be very unfair to them to not give them a chance to carry on and finish the race. Why? What do you think? Where do you stand on it?
I wasn't really sure. I just saw, I think it was an IndyCar driver that I follow on Twitter, said that it was unfair and that it should have been called off. I can't remember who it was, but I was just interested to hear your thoughts. I kind of agree that as long as you don't know, on that day, you don't really know what's caused it. So if other people have managed with the same tyres and not had that issue, then they should get the chance to go for the win. And also, if it hadn't happened, then we wouldn't have got the fantastic 2 laps that followed.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good, wasn't it?
So we had a few laps under the safety car, and then it was red flagged. So we ended up with a second parade lap and then 2 laps of racing, which was a pretty good argument for sprint racing, I reckon. Yeah, so the lights started lighting up, and Lewis Hamilton was sat there with there's no other way to put it, smoke billowing out of his brakes. It was quite surprising. Like, it looked like too much smoke.
Yeah.
Why would? Do you think he questioned it at the time? Like, what the hell's going on here? Or is that actually kind of a normal thing?
I think we've seen it quite a few times. Maybe it was just, things like the sunset and the lighting of this particular grid. But I think the system that Mercedes have, that is quite common for them to have sitting on the grid.
Okay.
And something they've kind of had to do because they normally find themselves at the front of the grid where their brakes and tyres go cold very quickly, which is why they've developed this system. But boy, do they need to move the switch.
Yeah. We had lights out, away we go for the second time. And
He didn't say that, actually.
oh, did he not?
No. We've had this conversation as well. I'm glad he didn't.
Well, the cars started moving again. And Lewis did shoot off. Got away from the line brilliantly. Perez did a little bit of defending. But it looked like Lewis was in the front and was going to take the corner. But then he just didn't stop. And he just kept going straight on. So had to somehow stopped by this point. Took a really wide line and then joined at the back with no hope of recovering in, like we say, just 2 laps. It was mad.
It's like it's written by a scriptwriter. Like, you couldn't have written it perfectly. The championship leader has just crashed out of the race by no fault of his own. Lewis Hamilton is in the lead. He's going to make up 25 points on Max, who only had a 4-point lead going into the race. That could have been completely championship deciding. And he absolutely binned it.
Yeah. So he supposedly knocked this magic switch, which it looked like it just turned his brakes off. I assume it does something else, but that's what it looked like.
So,
and then he just, that was it. That was his race pretty much lost.
Did you hear, I think it was Anthony Davidson explain what the brake magic button does?
I didn't hear that one. I saw Hazel Southwell on Twitter kind of did a bit of an explainer about how it changes the balance between the regenerative braking and the actual braking in the car. Something. But if you've got a bit more knowledge on this.
Okay. Well, the way they explained it on the TV was basically it shifts the brake balance from like 56% to like 92% at the front. So they can overheat the brakes, which creates that smoke when they're sitting on the grid.
Okay.
And it basically heats the tyre from the inside rather than just the outside when you're on a parade lap, formation lap, safety car, and keeps the heat in those tyres, which gives Mercedes incredible restarts.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a cool system to have. But that's why you don't hit the brakes that hard when you've got that on. You kind of brake quite long, and you're not doing the speeds that you'd be doing into turn 1 at Baku under the safety car. So he'd turned it off and then was defending from Perez because Perez kind of came over and flicked the switch back on again. So when he braked, he had like 90% brake balance. The front's just locked up and there's just nowhere to go. Like the car didn't stop.
That's interesting.
Because he said he did there was some radio when he was sat in the car after he was parked in Parc Ferme, where he said something about brake magic, and Bono was like, Lewis said, I thought I turned it off, and Bono said, you did, but you flicked it back on again.
It's obviously not heartbreaking, that sounds a bit over the top, but quite kind of crushing for Lewis to have an experience like that. But I also find these sort of moments really interesting because if this hadn't happened, like 90% of Formula One fans would have no idea what brake magic is.
No.
And we wouldn't have heard of it. It'd just be one of these like secretive devices that Mercedes has developed. So I quite like it when these things come to light and you can find out about these really creative ways that the teams are
Yeah.
improving themselves. And like Mercedes used to being in the front, maybe not having the temperature in the brakes, so they've come up with this system to get the temperature in the brakes. That's super clever and quite admirable.
And it's a bit like DAS as well, isn't it? We knew about DAS because you can physically see the steering wheel move, and it makes you think how much we don't see.
But because of Lewis's disaster, that meant we ended up with probably one of the most popular podiums in terms of like fan love possible, I'd say, because we had Pierre Gasly ended up finishing third, Seb Vettel got promoted up second, and Sergio Perez took the win. And everyone on that podium looked so unbelievably excited.
Well, from the second start, Perez and Vettel had it pretty easy because, Perez went off into the distance because he was a lot quicker than the Aston Martin. A byproduct of Seb not making Q3 meant that when everyone moved on to the soft tyres, he was one of the only people that had a new set of soft tyres. So again, a good reason to come into Q2. But Gasly really had to work to fend off Charles. The fact that
Lando at points as well, he was getting in the mix with Charles too.
Yeah, but the fact that he was overtaken and then re-overtook Charles on the same straight, like, you don't see stuff like that. We don't need the 2020 run rules. This is great. Like, it works fine.
It works fine in Baku.
We'll just race there forever.
Yeah, I was super impressed with the way Pierre just stayed calm and kept focusing and like, yeah, third is mine. I'm having that point. It was great, and it means that he's now finished first, second, and third, which is excellent.
Yes,
I like the symmetry there.
And there's a mind-blowing statistic about Sergio Perez. He is the only driver in the hybrid era to win a race with two different teams.
It's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you kind of find yourself thinking, that's ridiculous, why the hell's that happened? But then, apart from like Daniel Ricciardo, not many drivers have changed teams in the hybrid era.
No. And that's just how dominant the dominant teams have been. We spoke about the 2017 race last week. Where does the 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix compare? Which is better?
Oh, 100% 2017.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Like, this race was good, but it wasn't as like consistently exciting and unpredictable. It had like 2 moments of madness that meant there was about 6 mad laps.
But then those 2 moments of madness, I think, outweigh anything that happened in 2017, given their significance on the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
If, like Lance Stroll crashing because of a tyre failure is nothing. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It's sad for him, but it's fine. It happening to Max Verstappen 6 seconds out in the lead, that's huge.
yeah, but then because Lewis also messed up, the impact on the championship is kind of nullified.
That's true, but then I would argue that it's just an extra layer because everyone expected him to finish that race at least 18 points in the bag on Max. And he made a rare mistake that he never makes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying it was a bad race. Just think, in terms of enjoyment over a 2-hour period, 2017 has it in the back.
I think there also, if we could have a race that was the craziness of the first half of 2017 and then the craziness of the second half of Sunday's race in like one Grand Prix, it would be too much.
It would be too much. But after the championship fight was kind of nullified because both of them messed up, it means it's everything to play for in France next week,
Hmm.
which is going to be very exciting, I'm sure.
France. Yay. Yeah.
What
Well
about you?
on.
Which would you pick between 2021 and 2017?
I think it's summed up right in the noise Mark Webber made on Channel 4 commentary. That moment was the most exciting moment of both races.
What, just that one, like, chickeny scream? The only way to describe it.
No, I think seeing Lewis Hamilton go off, and it wasn't, just the championship. This is the first time he's not finished in the top 10 for 50 races.
54.
For 54 races.
Yeah.
It's just totally unexpected. And like the thing, the big thing in the Azerbaijan race in 2017 was Seb driving into Hamilton. And that was Seb blowing his top, right? That was him doing something he shouldn't have done. It was good drama. This is something that is good drama and completely racing.
Mm.
Not something like almost manufactured.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I like that it's like polar opposite results for Seb in the two races.
And oh no, not for Lewis. It was,
Everyone hated.
yeah.
And then in this one, glorious return to form.
That was our review of this year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. You can catch our retrospective on the 2017 Bonkers Baku race by heading to our channel. While you're there, subscribe, give our videos a like. Make sure you head over to Twitter @FridayFormula, where you can keep up to date with anything we've got going on. You can follow us personally on Twitter. I'm @WillLongman, and Owen is...
Owen_Bellwood.
And I'm sure we'll be treating our frustrations at being second and third in our 3-team fantasy Formula 1 league at the moment, which is very embarrassing, but you can compound that embarrassment by joining us. The link is in the description of the video. In the meantime, come back next Friday when we'll be talking about what could have lied in store for Nico Rosberg had he stayed in Formula 1. Should be a good conversation and more interesting than the French Grand Prix. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.